Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Let's just check that we are in fact live. And this is actually happening. Aha, excellent. I think we are live. And I think people are watching, so fantastic. Guys, you can actually comment in the chat as well. We will pick those up as well as we go along, inshallah. And welcome, first of all, to this. I think it's going to be a really interesting session with Mufti Faraz and Mufti Billal, who are our two expert Islamic finance Muftis, but also, on all sorts of topics. And what we've done for today is just pull together the top 10 most commonly asked, but also interesting and more, I think, novel areas that we've had questions around in 2020. And inshallah, we'll be going through all of those systematically, and hopefully that will be really, really beneficial. I should probably, I guess I don't probably need to introduce you guys. It's kind of self-evident, isn't it? Mufti Billal Umarji, hailing from the beautiful island of, I always get this wrong, not Mauritius? No, not Mauritius.
Reunion. Near Mauritius.
Reunion, where the Top Gear guys, Jeremy Clarkson and co, they did an episode recently where they went to the island of Reunion.
Did they?
Yeah, they did. You should check it out.
I wasn't aware of that.
And Mufti Faraz Adam is the sole reason why Leicester City recently won the Premier League because of Al-Barakah. Yeah. So let's dive in, guys.
Absolutely.
First question is one that has come up a lot this year. Is Bitcoin and cryptocurrency halal or haram? So maybe Mufti Faraz, do you want to deal with that one?
Okay, sure. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I mean, with regards to crypto assets altogether, and I recently wrote on this, there's 4 current views in the industry amongst Sharia scholars and advisors. There's one group of scholars who say it's not Sharia compliant simply because they don't see anything tangible existing. It's speculation. There's no regulation. There's too much risk. That's one group of scholars. Another group simply say we're not going to comment. Right? So they do tawaqquf, what we call tawaqquf in Arabic. Then there's a third group of scholars who are of the view that crypto assets can be digital assets, but they are not in the ruling of money or currencies in any way, shape, or form. Then number 4 are those scholars who feel that no, crypto assets can be mediums of exchange in particular networks if they are used solely as a medium of exchange. Right? So they're not currencies universally like you have the fiat currencies. Rather, they serve as a medium of exchange in their specific network. My personal view is I incline between the 3 and the 4, which is more or less reflective of the position of the Securities Commission of Malaysia. So the Sharia Advisory Council of the Securities Commission of Malaysia, they released a resolution also of this view that digital assets can be are Sharia compliant if they fulfill a number of conditions. And now they've released a resolution on this that's available online. Other scholars are of the view that no, until there is government regulation and other safeguards in place, that's only when cryptocurrencies and crypto assets will be Sharia compliant. What I just want to highlight before I finish off on this question is any crypto asset a person invests in must go through a Sharia screening, right? So you need to know what the project is all about. I've added another screening, which is the legitimacy screening. You need to ensure, as a Sharia advisor or Sharia board screening, that the token is not a scam. Because I think in 2017, 2018, there were like 80% of the tokens were fraudulent, right? So if a Sharia scholar is now screening them and he's saying they're halal, it becomes his now duty to also look out for that, because he's now saying that this is Sharia compliant. An element of Sharia compliance is not deceiving people. Number 3 is looking at the utility of the token, which is absolutely essential. And number 4 is if it's an equity token, then you need to see the financials of the project that's involved, like we do for stocks and shares, right? So those screenings must be, systematically gone through for any token a person invests in.
Jazakallah khair. Mufti Sahib, actually, just a quick follow up on that, because I know that people often ask this. Is there, is there a place where they can come to get that done? What is there, like a key checklist that you can give them? Tezos or random currency comes up, and you come across what are the 2 or 3 things that you need to do before you can invest in this?
Yeah. White paper, number one. You have to go through the white paper, understand what's it all about, right? And for any investor, and like at IFG, you do the same thing. You educate the individuals to make these decisions themselves, right? As an investor, you have to learn about this. You can't make all the profit and gain and not go through the pain, right, of screening something. So look at the white paper, number one. Look out for anything which is not Sharia compliant. And number 3, just look at, there's many ways to check the legitimacy of something. I've written a research paper on cryptocurrencies. It's available online. And I've written a whole list how you can check for the legitimacy of a coin. But of course, it's not exhaustive or all-inclusive, but it is something which will help you.
Excellent. Jazakallah khair. Mufti Billal, let's come to you for the second question, which is my favorite question. And this is the question: is Jeff Bezos the Dajjal? And let me preface this by saying that the question, I actually gave this a fair bit of thought, and ultimately, that question, it does deserve it does deserve to be answered properly, because at some point the question, is X Dajjal, will actually be true. Like, the answer will be yes. So over to you, I guess.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yes, I mean, the question is legitimate, and the answer I have provided as well on the website, although it might be a bit short, but I feel that is a very legitimate answer. And some people might have felt that it was a bit sarcastic, but in reality it wasn't, and I will explain why. The lesson I'm trying to show in this answer is that, look, first of all, Dajjal is real. We agree on that. The second thing is, the Prophet ﷺ have given clear definition, clear description, I should say, of what Dajjal will look like. Now, either you take this description on its face value, and then you actually wait for somebody that looks exactly like how the Prophet ﷺ had described, or you try to draw analogy, which the questioner have tried to do in his question. He drew analogy with the one eye, and I don't know, there was a lot of things he mentioned there. If you're trying to draw analogy, then it's absolutely fine as well. Now, similarly, when I'm going to answer, I'm going to do the same as well. There are many ahadith where the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that if you read part of Surah Kahf or the entire Surah Kahf, for example, every Friday, then you're going to be protected from Dajjal. Now, the answer I provided was, if Amazon, who is owned by Bezos, allow the sale of Surah Kahf on the website, then Jeff Bezos is not the Dajjal. Why? Because we learn from the hadith that there must be something about Surah Kahf, right? Why did the Prophet ﷺ selected that particular surah? Why didn't he just say, whoever reads the Quran or whoever reads Ayatul Kursi? We know that Ayatul Kursi is the best protection against all evil. Why did the Prophet ﷺ choose Surah Kahf? So there must be something particular about Surah Kahf. And for this reason, then you try to draw analogy. You can even open the meaning of the hadith. You can even say that, well, the sale of Surah Kahf, the fact that Surah Kahf is being sold and through Amazon, then it can be something that will determine whether the owner of Amazon is Dajjal or not. So this is why I said, if he sells Surah Kahf on Amazon, then he's not the Dajjal. So this is one thing. The second thing, one very quick thing I'd like to highlight is that if he is Dajjal, then what is it that we have prepared about it? Sometimes I'm not going to belittle the questioner by saying, he's been thinking too much, etc., etc. He's believing too much in conspiracy. Forget about all that. But what is it that we have prepared about it? If it turns out that Bezos is truly the Dajjal, or someone else is truly the Dajjal, is coming out tomorrow, then are you prepared to face him or not? What is your connection between yourself and Allah? Do you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will save you from the fitna of Dajjal or not? So this is a true question that everyone must ask themselves.
Jazakallah khair, Mufti Saab. I like the way you answered it, to be honest, because you know, I honestly didn't know how to respond to that, and I thought that the way you answered it was elegant and made sense. Next question is back to everyone's favorite topic, the topic of 2020, I think, which is the proof of stake technique or technology permissible? And feel free, Mufti Saab, to add to that, you know, in terms of like any kind of ancillary points that you need to make to answer that question.
Sure. So on the proof of stake, so what is a proof of stake? It's a consensus mechanism, right? Blockchain being a decentralized platform, there needs to be a way for people to come to some kind of resolution and move forward. So there's a number of consensus mechanisms that have been developed. Proof of stake, there's many types of proof of stakes as well. There's not one. That's what makes it so challenging. And people think it's very easy when it comes to saying yes or no. And we get many of these questions, but it's not. You have to review the entire mechanism before even commenting. Because these technologies are so new, you have to be extra diligent and extra careful. Now, when it comes to proof of stake, what's actually happening is on some platforms, a person will freeze or stake his token. That means that he's put himself forward to be selected to validate the data, whatever data is going on the blockchain. If he's selected and it happens, he'll earn some rewards. There's ways that people are selected as well, like the amount you stake, for example. Now, so from a Sharia perspective, this is not gambling, because staking doesn't mean gambling. First of all, your wealth is not being transferred to somebody else. You're not winning or earning at the expense of another person, which is what gambling is in simple terms. But proof of stake is you are freezing or putting yourself forward. If you get selected, then you will be the one who will validate and you'll earn rewards. So from a Sharia perspective, many proof of stakes can be Sharia compliant, but it's not easy to generalize like that as well. There are different types of proof of stake. It's different from the proof of work mechanism, where people are solving mathematical riddles to solve a problem and add data to the blockchain. So when it comes to proof of stake being halal, in a nutshell, it has the potential to be Sharia compliant, and the reward can be Sharia compliant if everything is Sharia compliant. Now there's been a development with the DeFi, the decentralized finance movement. The new development is what we call liquidity pools, right? People are now staking their coins to add liquidity in a pool for people then to make exchanges, right?
Is this also called yield farming, Mufti Saab?
Yeah, an example is yield farming, one of the examples, right? So this is where it gets much more difficult and it's not so clear. I mean, each product service facility would have to be reviewed independently, individually, before you can comment. And so that's just like really, so in a summary, proof of stake can be Sharia compliant if everything is Sharia compliant, but it's not possible to generalize at all. And that's why on our forum, Fatwa Forum at IFG, it's very difficult for us to give a straight yes or no answer, because this needs serious review, and I'm sure Mufti Billal would agree with me on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Well, let's turn to the next question, which is drop shipping halal? Over to you, Mufti Billal.
See, there are different models of drop shipping, and again, everybody have experienced different type of drop shipping. So if you speak to everyone have their own idea according to their own experience. But it's very there's actually two things that are very important that I believe for drop shipping to be halal. There's two things that we need to pay attention. The Prophet ﷺ taught us to not sell anything that we do not have ownership of. There are certain exceptions which falls under istisna and bay salam, and that's on our website, on the forum. You can look at the condition there. But otherwise, it is not permissible to sell something that you do not have ownership of. So whoever does drop shipping, when they're selling something on Amazon or eBay or something like that, they must not give the impression that they are selling something that they already have ownership of, or they're selling something that they have the stock present in their house or in their factory or something like that. They must not mislead the person, because you don't have the ownership of that item that you're selling. So this is one thing that is very important. Another thing that the Prophet ﷺ taught us is that to not sell something that we do not have liability of. Okay. Now, some ulama, the debate comes around at what point does liability get transferred from A to B. So if you are contracting a supplier from China, for example, and you are ordering, let's say, a mobile phone, and you're telling your supplier to send that mobile phone to your customer who bought it from Amazon, at what point did you take liability of the mobile phone, you as a seller? This is the real question that you need to ask. So when you're going to, if you want your drop shipping model to be halal, you need to ensure that you don't mislead people thinking that you're selling something you have ownership of, because it's not true. And secondly, you need to ensure that when your item is being shipped from your supplier to the customer, during that time, you have the liability of that item. Now, how are you going to take liability of that item? Well, according to the explanation of the ulama, it can take different form. So some people have said, about taking possession, physical possession, constructive possession, etc. Many people have said that it is the dropshipping model can work under the Maliki school of jurisprudence. That is true, but only if at the time of the supplier in China, for example, he's shipping your mobile phone to your customer. At that time, you must have the entire liability of the mobile phone, which means if the mobile phone gets destroyed on the way to your customer, then you cannot go back to your supplier and tell him to refund you. You should assume liability right from the time that he's shipping the mobile phone. So this is something that you need to pay. These are the two things you actually need to pay attention when you're doing drop shipping.
Great. The next question, we've had a fair bit actually over the months, and this is about trading 212, whether or not it, and maybe Mufti Faraz like you, and trading 212 have got different accounts, and some of them are halal, some of them are not. Over to you.
Yeah, so this has been a tricky question because there are multiple accounts on Trading 212, and we know that the CFD account is not Sharia compliant altogether. The ISA account is generally okay if you invest in Sharia compliant equity. The challenge comes in the investor account, which is recently they updated the terms and agreement, the terms and conditions, where they said we will lend your shares, right, and short them. So the question that was raised was, when you actively know that your broker is now lending your shares and shorting them, and that being problematic, see from a Sharia perspective, the Sharia standards of IOFI and other scholars are of the view that lending shares is not Sharia compliant. Why is it not Sharia compliant? Because shares are what they call non-fungibles. They've regarded shares as non-fungibles, which means that shares represent assets, and every asset is unique, or the bundle of assets represented by a particular share, they are unique to that share at that particular time. If I was to lend them and get them 6 months on the line, this share will represent a different set of assets. And therefore, when we lend as a contract, you have to get, it's a homogeneous transaction. You have to receive the same thing that you've given initially. That's why most scholars, and even the IOFI standards, are of the view that you cannot lend shares. It's not something that you can lend because that what shares are representing is always changing. And thereafter, when you know that your broker or your counterparty is shorting them on top of that and entering into a non-compliant activity, then it becomes advisable and recommended then not to actively, knowingly engage in such activity. That's why my personal recommendation was to avoid this particular account if you can. And when you know there's so many other brokers out there, you're not forced to only deal with one broker and one account. Then you should avoid this transaction altogether and go elsewhere.
Mufti Saab, as a counterpoint to that, someone might say, well, aren't exactly, yeah, and actually all brokers, even most of their income or a lot of their income often comes from lending out your money on the money markets and getting rid of interest that way. So is it because, I mean, we know that already, right?
Yeah, I mean, so on this point, that's why it's always best to find a broker who doesn't deal in these things. It's like the conventional bank, and I've had that question in the back of my mind all this time. That we know also in conventional banks that your money is being used, on the asset side of the conventional bank, and they're doing all sorts. And your liability really ends with your counterparty. What he does thereafter, it's their responsibility. But when it comes to a broker, they're your agent as well, right? So it's best if a person can find another broker who doesn't deal in such activities. Brilliant. That would be the best thing, best course of action. I mean, you don't want to be in the value chain of non-compliant activity. That's all, and that's why we're trying to avoid here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that makes sense. In terms of the next question, just looking down my list. Oh yes, so we've got home insurance, and the question is around whether or not you can take out home insurance when you're taking out an Islamic mortgage, because it's often, it's always required actually to take out an Islamic mortgage, and there aren't really any halal options on the market these days. So how do we deal with that, Mufti Saab?
Yes, I mean, as you have said, unfortunately, there are no halal alternatives in terms of insurance. If there was, then obviously we would be required to take that as a policy. But in the absence of a halal alternative, there is no other choice but to take a conventional home insurance, because it is a legal requirement. Now, obviously, don't go for the whole package. I don't know what kind of home insurance there are out there, but try, if you are going to go for something, then try to keep the minimum level of premium, if possible.
Makes sense. And I guess a related question, not strictly on agenda, but how is that the same approach you take for car insurance as well?
Yes. So you see, the car insurance, it's funny because sometimes the how do you call it? Some of the policy, I think, is it the third party one is more expensive.
Yeah.
But usually the other way around as well can happen. It turns out that it's cheaper than the basic level of insurance. So if that was to be the case, then always go for the cheapest option anyway. Do you understand? There is one thing though, is that at the back of that is that, can you pay the car insurance per installment? I think somebody asked that question yesterday. Because obviously if you pay per installment, then you will be paying more interest than if you were to pay in one go. So again, if you can afford to pay in one go, then it is best for you to do that. But if you can't afford to pay, then just pay per installments, right?
Makes sense. I mean, I'm completely going off schedule here, because I think that you guys were just getting too comfortable. So Mufti Faraz, off the back of that question, actually, another one that came to me was, where they are, where yield farms often will give you the interest, quote unquote, in a different currency to that which you staked it. So, if you are, you stake, I don't know, Ethereum or something, and then they give you the interest in Bitcoin. And that got me thinking, because technically that's fine, isn't it?
You know, I would not comment whether it's fine or not, because this would be then quoted everywhere online. But it always depends on the mechanics of the contract, really, and what's happening. Sometimes interest is interest, and sometimes interest is not interest. The word interest can be used. For example, in this question of insurance and paying on installments, up there, because you're not borrowing any money from them. Well, there's two things happening. Either a credit agency is coming and paying for you right now, and you're paying them back, and you're borrowing money. That's one way. That would be then interest. Otherwise, you're just being given an installment plan, and they're charging extra on that, right? So both models would exist for the insurance scenario, where one would clearly be interest and one would not be interest, even though it's termed interest. So it just depends on how it's being used. And even in this yield farming, it's just very difficult to comment without looking at anything. But yeah, these things are very complicated. I mean, understanding the mechanics is the key element here. And, you know, just one more thing to add. I think many people are in the chat asking about trading 212, that, you know, we've said it's not halal. We've not said it's not halal. We just said it's better just to find a broker who doesn't, you know, involve in non-compliant activity. And that's what's recommended and, you know, better to do.
Jazakallah khair. Yeah, yeah, you guys have to be very careful, don't you? Because, you know, whatever you say, then people rely on that. And trading 212 might be quite upset as well. So you have to be careful. No, Jazakallah khair for that. Here's the next question, and this is for Mufti Faraz. And the question is, what do you do when shares stop being Sharia compliant? And this is a particularly relevant question for this year, where markets have been very, very erratic. And you know, there's been all sorts of triggers being pressed and then not pressed and then pressed again. How do we deal with that? Yeah,
so in normal conditions, there's two views amongst Sharia boards, and this just depends on the Sharia board of the particular platform that you're trading with. Some Sharia scholars and Sharia boards are of the view that you must divest immediately, so you must, you know, liquidate your position, close your position, and exit as soon as it's non-Sharia compliant. Another view among scholars, which is more popular, is you have respite for 90 days, right, for one quarter, for one period. And if at the end of that period it's still non-compliant, then you must liquidate your position and close that trade altogether. And you cannot profit from the difference between the time you found out it was compliant till you exit. So if any profit was made, you have to liquidate that particular profit for that particular period. Anything before that, you'd be allowed to keep. So those are the two views. Now, coming to last year, 2020, when the markets were, you know, really volatile, everything changed. Some senior scholars like Sheikh Nizam Yaqubi and others advise that you may want to look at the 36 months trailing average as a market cap, because then that smoothens out the ratios that you're using for financial screening. Other scholars have said also you may want to consider total assets, right? Because that again is potentially more, you could say, or less volatile as opposed to market cap, which was really hit last year. Because look, what's happening in a company, especially last year, so much debt was taken on that would straight away impact all the ratios. So you were finding companies are flipping from compliant to non-compliant overnight. Other scholars said you freeze the screening. Wherever the criteria was, or wherever the screening was pre-COVID, will be used for the entire COVID period. That was another view that was voiced by some scholars. So all these things exist, these different views. What I would advise is, if you are in the situation, then you find that your shares are non-compliant, then look for that quarter over that period for 90 days. If it remains non-compliant, then liquidate your position and give that profit that you've gained for that particular period away in charity, and find another halal share to invest in.
Jazakallah khair. Great. So we're whizzing through these questions, by the way, guys. So please feel free to ask away your questions in the chat, which we will turn to, inshallah, after we've got through the final three questions. And I am looking very much forward to the final questions, which is around a wife's finances and whether or not she needs to share that with her husband. But I'll get to that in due course. The first question is around medical insurance and whether or not that is permissible. So coming to you on that, Mufti Billal, and this is in particularly relevant because you have a lot of people who work for companies where they get very cheap or free medical insurance. So they're often thinking about should they take it or not.
If the medical insurance is offered to them as a benefit, which is not part of the salary, then it's fine. But if it's actually part of the salary, then it will be problematic because you are basically paying for an insurance policy. And insurance, as you know, is usually not permissible. So, for example, I think you have the salary, what is it, the salary sacrifice or something like that? It's called salary sacrifice arrangement. So something like this would not be permissible because the medical insurance is actually part of your salary. So instead of getting paid money, they just offset a certain amount of your wage against the medical insurance policy. So if that was the case, then it would not be permissible. But if it's not part of your salary, it's just an added benefit that where you don't have to contribute or anything like that. Or sometimes it might even be, like optional. You can opt in or out and you don't have to pay for anything or anything like that. Then it's absolutely fine because then it's like a gift that is offered to you.
Understood. So I think on the salary sacrifice thing, or sometimes in these schemes, they make you pay the tax on it, but they don't make you pay the actual amount that they would have to pay for the insurance. Does that change the analysis at all?
Yes, I looked into it once. I think so. On this, even on the non-salary sacrifice one, there are certain benefits that are taxable. I personally would not see anything wrong with it as long as it is not considered to be part of your salary. Do you understand? So, because the tax issue it should be treated as a separate issue.
No, but it makes sense. Jazakallah khair. Guys, if you are just joining, then this is the top 10 questions that we've had during 2020 with Mufti Faraz and Mufti Billal, going through all of the questions. We will also have a Q&A session immediately after these last two questions that we'll be going through. So please do fire away with your questions below. I know from our Telegram groups, which I'll share a link for actually in the chat, I know that there's a lot of questions out there around all sorts of things related to Islamic finance. So now's your chance. Mufti Faraz and Mufti Billal are, incredibly high demand, and take advantage, inshallah. So Mufti Faraz, Zakat is a topic that often comes up when it comes to investments, and some people have been asking, if there's Zakat, if they've held some stocks for a long period of time, what's the best approach to that? Should they start considering that as just a long-term investment, as opposed to actually paying zakat as is standardly paid on the liquid elements of that stock?
I mean, with regards to zakat on stocks and shares, there's two ways to calculate zakat on that. One is if you're actively trading that, you've purchased the shares with a view of capital gain. You want to go and make a profit, you might sell it after 1 month, after 2 months, after 5 months, but you're actively looking to trade it on the market at the best price. Then that, the scholars are of the view that zakat should be paid on that annually with the rest of your zakatable assets. However, if a person has invested in shares with a long-term view as a buy and hold strategy, looking for dividend income and just as a savings as opposed to capital gain, then in that scenario, one should still pay zakat, but instead of paying zakat on the full value of your investment, you'd pay according to the zakatable assets in the company. Now, whilst I was with National Zakat Foundation UK, and Mufti Billal was also there, we conducted a research on the FTSE 100 to see what's the what are the zakatable assets in a company, right? So we reviewed all the balance sheets of the FTSE 100, and from our research, we were of the view that 25% is a very conservative and a reliable figure to use for your zakat calculation. So you can pay zakat on 25% of your holding. So if I have shares worth £100, I just take 25% of that, which is £25, and pay 2.5% of that as my zakat liability for this particular year on my shares. That will inshallah absolve you of your zakat liability. And this percentage will be reviewed every five years. That's the plan from National Zakat Foundation.
Jazakallah khair, Mufti Saab. And finally, and I think this is a very interesting question from Billal, is do I need to tell my husband about my income and finances? And this is obviously coming from his wife. Careful, Mufti Saab. There's this could cause a riot. I think you're on mute. This might actually be the most prudent answer that you can give.
I was just trying to get away with it, but it didn't work. No, I think there's two things here. One is the fiqh answer, right? Now, I think there's something I'd like to say here is when you're asking this sort of question to a mufti with his online and public domain or anything like that, you need to ask yourself, what is it that you're trying to achieve by asking this question? How is the answer going to help you? These questions related to matrimonial life, you need to know exactly what's the benefit of asking these questions. Because sometimes asking a question, getting an answer from a scholar is not going to help your situation. There are people, they will ask a mufti for an answer regarding the marriage life. They're going to go back to the husband or to the wife and they're going to say, Mufti so-and-so said this. You see, I was in the right, you're in the wrong. And that is going to cause more problems than solving anything. So this is one question. I'm not saying don't ask, don't come. The reason why I answer these sort of questions sometimes is because I think to myself, maybe the person is in need of guidance, or maybe they have nobody to speak to or something like that. And that's why they're turning to the forum to take that step of asking question. But this is something you need to ask yourself. Is the answer going to help your situation or not? Because these sort of problems, they can only be solved with the person that you're living with. So in this instance, it's your husband. I mean, why is it that your husband is asking to know about your income and your finances? And why is it that you want to try to hide it from him? This is the real question that needs to be answered. And these questions, they can only be answered by the people that are concerned. So you need to speak to your husband and your wife and sort out these problems. If not, if needed, then go and seek counseling. Go get answers from real professionals. But otherwise, the only thing we can provide is the fiqh answer. Yes, it's halal to do this. No, it's halal. It's not halal to do it. Then how is it going to help your situation? I don't know. Maybe sometimes, I know it does, because there are sometimes people, husband or wife, they use Islam as a weapon against the other half, right? They always say they take advantage of the lack of knowledge of the partner and say, oh, this is how it should be done in Islam, this and that. So if you're trying to get a real answer to actually debate with your husband or wife, then fair enough. But otherwise, we can't give proper professional answer on this matter. We can only say whether it's halal or not. So in this scenario, you don't need to tell your husband, but how is my answer going to help your situation? I do not know. You understand? It's better you solve it out with your husband and a counselor.
Next.
Just to add to this, right, if I may, one of my teachers, he says something amazing, that you shouldn't let a fiqh dictate your marriage. You should make love dictate your marriage, right? That love has its own fiqh, right? And that's what should dictate your marriage, not these rights, regulations, laws, not that. It's very mechanical. We don't live like that in any other section or part of our life, right? We go with the flow, and same thing with the marriage.
Definitely. In fact, sometimes I think to myself, if these little issues, if you need a mufti to answer them, then there must be a real problem in your marriage or in your relation. I think somebody asked again last time about the wanting to marry someone who decided to live abroad, etc. I mean, this is something you really need to solve. The mufti cannot be there for everything, right? At every minute of your life, of your marriage life, to answer problems for you, right? To solve the problems. So these things, like Mufti Faraz said, you know, you need to turn more towards. Mufti Faraz, by the way, you had fiqh of love before, so maybe you can tell people to join that course, the fiqh of love.
Mufti, you did a course. Is that a real course that you did? Fiqh of love.
Yeah, I think it was called Love from Above.
Nice.
That's what it's called. It was a couple of years ago.
Well, maybe we should trot that out on this Islamic Finance Guru.
Yeah.
So I mean, before we dive into the questions, because we're through on the questions, fun story is that my so I didn't realize this, but I get like a wife or like a spousal card for my credit card, and it links to the same app. So one day when I spent something, £11.40 or something in a shop, I got a text message like immediately afterwards from my wife saying, "What's this £11.40 about?" From this B&B wine shop or something. And like these shops have like strange names because they used to be something else. So then I realized that actually all of my income and my finances is automatically disclosed to my wife already. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. There we are. Okay, let's dive in. Let's dive into this one first. Mufti Faraz, over to you, I think.
Would you consider releasing a list of all the... See, with regards to this, it's very hard to release a list because things can change. We just don't know, right? But yeah, there's certain tokens and coins which are already known to be Sharia compliant, like your Bitcoin, right? More or less, most scholars who are the view that cryptocurrencies are Sharia compliant will, give Bitcoin, Litecoin, these kinds of examples to be Sharia compliant. Mufti Billal, anything to add to
that? Not at all. However, Mufti Sab, if you have a list of halal token, then it might be worth letting people know about it, whether it can be sold or anything like that, because a lot of people have asked me as well about the list of halal token. So if you already have an existing one, then it might be worth making it available.
Yeah, sure. Good idea.
Some people have even suggested to create a PDF file and to charge to get access to it. So it might be something that you might want to look into.
Yeah, inshallah, we're working on something which we'll mock up. Obviously, we're not muftis, but what I want to do is just create a single place where you just can download all the white papers of all like the top 100 currencies, and then just get like a brief analysis on there. But obviously, as Mufti Saab said, this is a live thing, which you can't really ever definitively say because things are evolving so fast. Let's go to the next question. Mufti Billal, do you want to take this one?
So is purification only for dividends or for profits too? Well, I would say that dividends is profits. So I don't really understand the difference between the two. Can someone explain to me?
I think he's asking for capital gains as well as your dividend income. So when you sell your shares and you make capital gain.
Yes. I mean, either way, you have to purify your share. I mean, if there was some sort of haram revenue, which was part of the shares, then you have to purify accordingly. So whether it's 5% or 30% or whatever, any haram income that has been generated from that investment, it needs to be purified. Whether you're selling the shares for a capital gain or whether you're just waiting to get dividends, you have to purify it.
And can they accept the original 5% that was haram? So when they invested £100 and they exited at 120. Actually, let's say they exited at 200, and it consistently was 5% haram. What do they purify on?
So if they invested 100 and they made £100 profit, and it was 5% of haram income, then you give 5% of the total amount. The question would be, though, is what if you're selling it at a loss? So you invested £100 and there was 5% of interest, but when you sold your shares, you sold it for, let's say, £95. Now, do you need to give that 5% away or not? My opinion is that you don't need to. I don't know what's Mufti Faraz's opinion on that, but because your initial capital was halal for you, right? So you are allowed to recoup that amount. So now that you're selling it at a loss and you can't get your £100 back, so the 5% that you're losing, it should be offsetted against the actual amount that you needed to purify your with. I don't know about Mufti Faraz's opinion on that.
I think I've written something on the Fatwa forum, so I'd just recommend everybody to go to the forum on there. There is something quite lengthy I've written on that particular question.
On the question of the Billal, so the reason why I brought it up was I was having a discussion with another scholar on this, and his view was that the 5% that you take, even on the £100 investment that you make, the 5% haram that you've taken a position on, you can't. His argument was that you can't re-accept that into your income because you know that bit is haram. So that was where he was coming from. So his argument was actually you purified £10 rather than the £5. Gut instinct to me is also on your side of the argument, but I thought I'd raise it with you.
So he's basically saying because when you've put £100, 5% should have been considered as haram because there was a 5.
Yeah, because I think it might not be seen as acceptable from a mal perspective, or something like that.
Wallahu alam, I would not agree with that, but I don't know. Mufti Faraz, is that your opinion as well on that? Or?
No, I believe Ibrahim and myself, we had a lengthy discussion on this as well, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's for another day.
Yeah, sometimes I just feel like throwing kerosene on the fire, but I can't help myself. Okay, so here we've got my understanding is zakat is paid on gold extracted from mines immediately. If you own shares on companies that mine gold, would you need to look at the gold silver output and pay 2.5% on that? Mufti Faraz, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so it just depends on the company. What kind of company is it? Is it gold extraction? If it is, then potentially yes. You'd have to take that into consideration as well. On the gold element, right? But then there's another element to this answer, that who owns the gold, what's actually happening, which would have to be considered as well. Like who actually owns the gold? But if it was a Muslim company, right? So if we take a step back, and if it was a Muslim company mining, then they would be responsible definitely to pay zakat on that gold, and pay the zakat on gold or zakat on excavation.
Jazakallah khair. At the beginning, you stated CFD trading is not permissible. Is this the case even if a broker offers an Islamic account such as eToro, where there is no interest charged on holding a leveraged trade? Mufti Billal, do you want to tear this to shreds?
I mean, I am yet to see a CFD that is Sharia compliant. How can CFD be Sharia compliant is beyond me. So
yeah, it's so to Brother Muhammad, I think it's a fair, it's a fair question, because you search Islamic account, Islamic Forex account, Islamic CFD account, and you find dozens of these guys, and all they've done is they've taken out this interest element, and you think because 20 people are doing it, it must must have said it's halal.
Yes,
but,
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like what Mufti Faraz said earlier. Sometimes, even though he hasn't got the name interest, but it is still interest, right? So the fact that they said there's no interest involved and we're going to call it Islamic account is not going to make it any better. And the funny thing is, all those people, as far as I know, the majority of them, And even once, I think someone asked a question on the forum, I don't know about which company. And at that time, or at the time of answering the question, I went on the website and I actually asked the customer service officer. I said, they claim that they have an Islamic account. So I said, is your product certified Sharia compliant by scholars? And they said no. No Sharia scholar ever reviewed the product. So how did they make it halal? Allahu alam. So no, CFD is not halal. And if there are people that are saying that they have Islamic account and that they're not paying interest, etc., do not believe them until you see a certification from a Sharia scholar.
I mean, just to add to that, the problem with these platforms is when they say it's an Islamic account, all they do is remove interest and swap and rollover fees. That's what they do. But again, with CFDs, with Forex, you're not actually trading anything Sharia compliant. There's no actual trading. You're not taking ownership. So again, you're just opening a position on the market and you're liquidating that position and just netting the differences. That's all you're doing. That's not Sharia compliant because there's no actual trading taking place. That's the key problem. The interest and the swap and fees is a secondary issue. First, the actual transaction has to be right. So that's the problem with all of these Islamic accounts, which are very dubious. Personally, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
And the most, the saddest thing, is that they are Muslims. Okay, they are Muslim. They believe that it's halal, etc., and they invest it. Okay. There are other Muslims though that believe or make people believe that it is halal, and they do courses about it, and they're selling this product, and they're teaching people how to do it. And when you talk to them, and I think Ibrahim, you have that experience. When you talk to them, they it's like they're the biggest allama and biggest mufti on this earth. Understand? So this is the saddest part. Making something haram halal is even worse than doing something haram, believing that it was halal. Right? The investor sometimes he doesn't know. He just goes with the information. But the person who's selling this product, who's selling these courses, they know exactly what's going on. But it is the love of money that make them do that.
Yeah, for sure. I guess the analogy is where you say, look, brother, this is a piece of bacon, but I'm not going to cook it in any wine. It's going to pure virgin olive oil, and I'll serve it to you. It'll be brilliant. So there we are. Next question is for Mufti Faraz. Are you allowed to use leverage in the crypto and stock markets?
Sorry. Yeah. So when it comes to leveraging, I mean, leveraging majority of the time, it's the way it's facilitated. It's not Sharia compliant. So I'll be very, very careful when you come to use leverage. Generally, it involves some interest being paid, whether that's the initial margin or fees, whatever it may be. So I'll be very careful and cautious in taking leverage.
Jazakallah khair. Next question. Oh, here we go. Here's a good one. Are you allowed to long and short assets such as Bitcoin? And for this one, perhaps I go again to Mufti Faraz, because I know you've been thinking about this in recent times.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to shorting, that's really problematic. It's something which is really debated among scholars. But where it comes to selling long, you're just taking ownership and selling on. That's generally okay. But when it comes to shorting assets and shorting even Bitcoin, it's very debatable. Most scholars are still of the view that short selling and shorting is not Sharia compliant, and I would just stick to that as being the safe view of scholars.
Jazakallah khair. This question, I mean, it's a comment, but I don't actually understand it. So maybe you guys do. Mufti Saab must have watched Shooting Stars in the 90s, The Dove from Above. Lol. Does that ring a bell?
No, it doesn't.
No. Muftis don't watch films.
I think he's referring to the course that we titled Love from Above, right?
Oh, I see.
I was trying to say, yeah.
That was, I'm quite excited about that course. I think Sheikh Yasir Qadi did this course as well that I watched before I got married. So that was quite good.
I used to do a lot of marriage courses, but I think when crypto came, it changed. No. I think after that, I just started focusing on finance, to be honest, and I stopped doing courses on nikah.
Is it? Do you think it was? Do you think it tracked your life trajectory as well, as like your interest changed?
I think so, because until 2016, I was honestly doing like 3, 4, 5 nikah marriage courses, like full day seminars. So
Wow.
like going from all the way from being a teenager to your marriage to the core, your honeymoon period to life, right? But then I think after I think my involvement in finance grew and my passion. I think now it's just a matter of focusing one area and just delivering. There's so many scholars talking on marriage. I feel that they do a better job when they speak.
For a second, I thought Mufti Sahib said he's done 3, 4, 3, 5 nikah.
Mufti Sahib, this is live. Be very careful what you say.
Yeah.
Mufti Ka as Adam says it is. I think he means Mufti Faraz Adam says it in another video. Muhammad Nasir Al Chadi, IFG coin coming soon to the moon. That's what it's all about, and we'll get Mufti approval on that one, and we'll do a rollover everything. Thoughts on working as a Big Four auditor with clients being asset management, banking, insurance companies? This is a regular one. Do you want to go for it, Mufti Billal?
Thoughts on working as a Big Four auditor with clients. I think that question was asked before on the group, right? Well, as long as your role is Sharia compliant and you're not assisting in anything haram, then it's fine. But I think the question that was asked on the forum was about what if you are in an Islamic country, in a Muslim country, and you're working for one of them companies? Is it permissible to work for them or not? And I said, look, you need to assess the situation entirely, because sometimes some of the service that you're going to be doing while in an Islamic country, it does not mean it's halal. It might be a haram function, but in their context, it might be tolerable to do it, right? Because, like, for example, in North Africa, there are some countries that don't have access to Islamic finance, okay? Now, you cannot tell people to not work in a bank, for example, in a conventional bank, because if you do that, there's not going to be any bank tomorrow. It's very easy to say it, but in practice, it cannot happen. So if the question refers to that, then you need to be very careful. But otherwise, the principle is, as long as you're not doing anything haram, and you're not assisting in something haram, then it's fine. In terms of the banking and insurance, there might be difference of opinion, because sometimes the scholar says you shouldn't work for any client who is a bank or insurance company. Yeah, but I think again, you have to be a bit lenient towards it. You have to just ensure that your role is haram, is not haram, sorry, and you're not assisting in a product, in developing a product, or advising on something that is haram. Mufti Faraz might want to add something to that.
No, I think it's fine what you said.
And then I guess, just conscious of the time as well, so maybe we take the final question, which is a nice juicy one by Amir Khwaja. And Mufti Faraz, do you want to take this? What makes a coin not Sharia compliant? I thought all of them were halal since they're like Bitcoin. It's a fair question.
I mean, no, so they're not all like Bitcoin, right? The utility of Bitcoin was, and the key focus was to create an alternative medium of exchange, right? That's the only utility that it serves. Now you'll find other tokens which have different utility. For example, there are tokens which give you access to media, which adult material, right? Now, I don't want to say the name of the token, because if I say the name, everyone will Google it straight away, right? So I'm not going to say the name. But so different tokens give you some tokens will give you access to services, which may be not Sharia compliant, like I mentioned. Some will, like you get derivative tokens as well, right? So some tokens represent assets or derivative assets, right? Depending on what it is. Some tokens might be certain rights that you are granted as a result of that token. So Not all tokens are the same as Bitcoin. There's a range of tokens, and that's why you need to understand the utility of the token. And even not in the Sharia space, but in the conventional space, you have security tokens. These tokens now, which are recognized by the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission, if they fulfill the Howey test, they become security tokens, and they're treated like equity to some degree. So there are different types of tokens. They're not all the same. They have different objectives, and you need to understand what a token is, what it represents, what it's doing, the utility, and how you're making a gain before you can invest with confidence that is Sharia compliant.
Jazakallah khairan. Jazakallah khairan to both Mufti Faraz and Mufti Billal for making the time and sharing your thoughts with us today. I wanted to ask, is there any final comments that you'd like to make, any final parting wisdoms that you'd like to share before we head off into the sunset?
Mufti Billal, go ahead. Okay, I mean, I would just say everybody, they should engage more with the IFG forum, right? It's a brilliant place with great people on there. It's not necessary that it's only a fatwa forum and you have to get answers from us. I mean, everybody's welcome to. Everybody has expertise, has really good comments. So do engage more on the fatwa forum. The IFG website has some brilliant resources. Go on the IFG website and really read the different articles that are uploaded. Genuinely, I believe that they're one of the best, upcoming educational platform for personal finance, and for all these kinds of queries. They're doing a brilliant job. So may Allah reward them and accept their efforts. And they have a real vision, and we're seeing it play now. You could say that the 2020 startup, if you're calling them a startup, I'd give that award potentially. I don't know about Mufti Billal, but mashallah, it's a really good job that's being done at IFG. So do support them, go on the channels and take part in the activities.
Jazakallah khair to both of you, Mufti Faraz and Mufti. Oh, actually, Mufti Billal, you haven't said your final word.
Mufti Faraz already said it. What's left to say? We can only agree with what he says. No, but obviously, as he said, the forum is unique, right? But one thing I'll just say is that the forum is there to help people, and personally, I speak for myself, is a tool to learn, for learning as well, and I learn a lot as well through it as well. We're not here to entertain people in debate, etc. It's good for conversation, etc. But we're not here. Some people I know, sometimes they try to have an argument, maybe, or a debate or something like that. But that shouldn't be the aim of the forum. There will be things, I might be wrong. Today I might say an answer, but tomorrow I might say something else. Because it's a constant learning, and finance is something that changes all the time as well. So you always learn something. So you shouldn't expect us to be, or expect me to be, expert, and everything is going to be 100% forever. Do you understand? That is not the aim of the forum.
No, absolutely. Jazakallah khair to both of you. Jazakallah khair for everyone who tuned in. Please do check out the forum.islamicfinanceguru.com. Please do check out the groups that we've set up on Telegram. We've got the website with all the various different resources. It's an absolute pleasure to have you guys follow along with us. For us, the most important thing is that you guys are able to manage your money and your investments in a Sharia compliant way, but also in a way that makes you money. Inshallah, I look forward to 2022 when we can look back on the big questions that we've had in 2021, and I'm interested to see what they will be, because I think no one saw the questions that would come in 2020. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next year. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.